God! Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
270, 10-4 over there.
No, 10-4, head this way. Put the gun down! Put it down now! Put it down! Put the gun down! Put the gun down!
He hit him from deep.
Yo, and he hit him once.
One shot. That's deep.
Put the gun down! Stop right there! 101 SO, shots fired. Turn around! Turn around now! Turn around! Show me your hands right now! Show me your hands right now! Hey, I need help over here, you guys.
Wow, my man was walking around with all of that?
Look, that's what I wanted to show. You see this? That's what my man had on him.
Jesus. In the car too, también, bro. What was he ready for? Like, I'm curious. Like, was he ready for all-out war here? Like, what's good, bro?
He was walking around with, again, that's just to show people that, but again, My man, by the way, that cop shot once
One
from a
time,
good
got him
range.
from deep, bro.
Wow, I was like, first time saw it, I'm like, wait, he just got him with that? He
He
did,
Mr.
bro.
Miyagi'd him, bro. It was crazy.
Yo, he said, stop. I'm a marksman. Yo. I'm only gonna tell you this. One,
This
I
is no
don't
laughing
miss.
matter, Savory. Come on
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
This is
chill,
no
chill, chill.
laughing
Yeah,
matter.
this is
Hello
serious,
and
serious.
welcome to another live podcast on Drinks with a Nobody. I'm Macho, that's Savory. And you're watching us, that's right, on Nobody TV. All right, we had a really lengthy discussion yesterday, Savory, on police brutality and criminal justice system. Are the police being held accountable? We showed multiple examples of that, and just how also the police can be seen as a paramilitary at times. The criticism is endless on our police. There's an
Yeah,
attack. It's clear there's an attack on our police. Would you agree with that?
I would agree 1,000%. I'm excited to continue this to show more cases, to show more examples, right? Because, the more we see, it's not necessarily the more we know, but the more our eyes open to different kind of possibilities of quote unquote police brutality, man. So I'm excited to get into this,
I'm
man.
going through some of my notes here, Savory, and I got a couple of questions here just before we get into our first segment and mind your business. Is when they perform their day-to-day duties, who in the world writes their instructions, right? Who is the governing force that says,
Mhm.
"Yo, we're going to give you these kind of tactics. All right, you can put your knee on this part of the body, you can hog tie, you can arrest, you can
Mm,
stop and frisk." Who
it's
in
a
the
good way to
world
start.
who in
Mm.
the world gives these instructions? Like, I want to hear some of your initial thoughts here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. I'm not too knowledgeable in that, but let me give it a shot. Let me give it a
Okay,
shot. All right.
that's fair.
So we have local governments. I would assume this is the right way to do it. I would say the local government getting the feedback from the people who have experience in the field,
Hmm.
right? And seeking to create laws at a local level that make sense for criminals and the citizens. So I would imagine, right, in an ideal world, that the local government is hearing the the um the lawyers, the police officers, the chief inspectors, and actually getting together, right? This is what I look at when it's community kind of like impact, where I'm like, all right, my police officers or local government working with the police officers to understand their jobs, right? And kind of enforcing things that make sense for my community, which is
Wait,
why
do
I
you
would
have a
say
say? Do you have a say in how police perform their day-to-day duty? Do you and me have a say?
I don't have a say. Do you have a say? I don't. I don't
Well,
think
what
I
I'm
have a say.
saying, what I mean primarily, because I know you're thinking more like in a like right now, like, do I get to
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
say right now? No, I'm saying like, does voting have anything to say about that?
The people we vote. Yeah, the people
Yeah,
we vote
right.
in. Yeah,
So
yeah.
so it's fair to say that our
Mhm.
politicians are passing these bills that are talking about these things on the congressional floor, right? They want to pass these legislations so that when they can comprise of these tactics, they have these instructions based off of what we voted for, right? We play a small part in that.
Yeah, good point. Actually, yeah, yeah. I would say we play a small part of it. Why? Because we should know the ideas, the ideologies of these politicians coming in and how they're going to reform, change, or improve the system. That's why partly why
Yeah.
we vote for them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Good point.
So let's use that. Let's put that in our thinking caps today in our think tank. And let's now see where the show takes us under that premise. And the
Cool.
first segment that we always start off with, what is it, Savory? What do we got?
This. I am not going to participate in reducing funding for the police after we saw major city after major city defund the police. When you reduce funding for police, you actually lose lives in the communities.
So there was around $1 billion.
All right. I want to
All
pause it
right,
right
all
here.
right. Hold
Let's
up, hold
pause this
right.
right here. All right. I gave you some homework, Savory. If you read in the Slack, Slack is what we use, the software we use to communicate with one another throughout the day because we have a lot of information. And Savory can tell you, I just dumped so much information in there. And he's probably like, yeah, I'm not reading all of this.
I make sure I
But
get the videos.
yeah. But this is Paige Fernandez. She is the policing policy advisor at ACLU. ACLU is like a non-for-profit organization that comprises of legal attorneys that represents people. They have activists as well. They have advisors there as well. If you see sometimes at these protests, you'll see them wearing a vest. They're like a legal advisor. They'll be wearing a vest at these protests. I don't know why they're there, but they're there. I believe that the two people that went to jail in New York City for a crime, I guess throwing the Molotov cocktails, I think they were like two lawyers. I'm not entirely certain, but I think there were like two lawyers that were sentenced to arsonists and also I think damaging government property or something like that. So on and so forth. But anyways, this is Paige Fernandez. She's got some things to say here, and we're gonna vote whether yay or nay should Paige Fernandez mind her damn, not even just mind your business, but should she mind her damn business? Check this out.
Okay.
Divested from police budgets in 2020. Only 160 million of those dollars went into community-based services. The majority of the demand is not defund. It's not about taking away. It's about what we put in that place. There are a lot of pundits and elected officials and politicians who are using this idea that defunding the police is going to make us less safe, that with defunding the police in 2020, that is why their crime rates are going up in this country.
With violent crime on the rise, some of those proposed budget cuts are on the verge of possible.
So she's going to go into how that's wrong. But just to catch everyone up to speed, Paige Fernandez is citing that $100 billion was taken from the police budget in year 2020. Okay, $100 billion, Avery. And only $160 million of that budget was divested into community-based programs like feeding the hungry or like shelters or so on and so forth, right? She's saying there needs to be more funding in that. That's where she's really, really getting at. But she's going to explain as to why the more funding equals better for the community.
Okay.
Possibly being reversed by elected leaders.
When you take law enforcement officers off the street, you will inevitably see more crime in those communities.
You clearly saw catastrophic failures.
But there are a few facts that are important to note. The first is that the majority of the cuts to police budgets last year, which are phenomenal and they should not be overlooked, advocates did a lot of work on that, they only amount to less than 1% of the over $100 billion dollars that the U.S. spends on policing annually. So there was around $1 billion divested from police.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was $100 billion that is already in their budget for the police, and they took that. They've already taken a lot of money. I forgot the exact number how much they've taken. I thought it was $100 billion. I'm absolutely wrong, but they've taken from the police and only divested $160 million into the.
They've taken 1% is what she's arguing only.
Yeah,
they've taken more. Yeah.
Budgets in 2020. Only 160 million of those dollars that were cut from police budgets went into community-based services. And so what we see was only a small portion, a small fraction of the demand to defund the police enacted, where politicians are not actually investing.
And here, I wanted to kind of highlight that point right there. While there's little evidence that increased police surveillance leads to less crime, just want to hear your thoughts, just initially on that.
I mean, let's pull ourselves up. What up, everybody? Hold up. While there's a little evidence that increased police surveillance leads to less crime.
Yeah.
All right. What did you do a case study where you took them off the street and you saw crime decrease? Was that the study that was done, or are you going by again? If you, it's just again, this is the type of things that I have questions for, because how do you make such a statement? Do you know the opposite is true? Did you do a case study? Did you take Chicago police off the Chicago streets and saw a decrease in crime? Did that happen or something like that I missed?
But my
I
whole
don't know how
thing
you back
is,
that up.
the whole thing here is where this doesn't pass the smell test. Is she's not looking at the UK, where UK has an enormous amount of police surveillance all throughout cameras. So when someone commits a crime, they're more likely to turn themselves in because they know they're on camera. Okay, there's cameras everywhere in the UK, everywhere,
Mhm.
dude. Like it's insane how much cameras are. So when you think you're safe to remove your face covering, got you. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
they
yeah,
most
yeah.
likely turned themselves in there because of that. Now, look at the wording there, Savory. Look at the wording. There's little evidence that increased police surveillance is less crime. Is the objective for less crime? Is that the objective or to deal with crime?
Some people will argue both. You would say to deal with it and forget about less.
Yeah, because I think that's just like an angelic and ambition, right? You're on the side of angels, like crime is going to get lesser. No, I mean no, it's been increasing steadily, despite all these movements. It's been increasing. So
Yeah.
it's like we're on a steady rise, and it's been consistent this way for the last 40
And police
decades.
job is to deal with crime, not make less of it. It's just deal with it.
Yes,
All
I
right.
mean
Where it
the
comes
I
from, it's
guess
not their business.
who deals with it? I don't. Honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know, but she's arguing that the community based deals with that. Few more seconds here.
One study found that every 10 additional community-based nonprofits in a medium-sized city leads to a 12% reduction in homicide rate and a 10% reduction in violent crime. That means that if you add these small community-based nonprofits that are no more staffed than like 2 or 3 people, we can significantly decrease crime in communities and decrease violence and the harm that's being perpetuated.
Right here. Let's clip that. So, before we get to the vote here, and I want everyone who is watching, please vote yay or nay whether Paige Fernandez should mind her business before we cast our vote. So you can go right ahead, type that in right now. Do you think Paige Fernandez should mind her business and do a little further study, right? Or you think, hey, she's on to something. Let's actually listen to her a bit more. So here's where my vote comes from, Savory, and it's definitely going to be mind your business. And here's why. Page is overlooking the fact that BLM has received billions and billions of dollars as funding, okay, from donations and so on and so forth. And yet they're not just a movement, right? They're not just an activist movement. They actually provide certain community-based programs, right? And I say that loosely, but yet the founders are they're living lavishly, right? It's about how they handling that funding. So yet there's still crime spiking, right, as a result of their movement. So we cannot equate a community-based organization to say, "Hey, this will stop or lessen crime," because where it stops here, it gains in another area. Because I'm a trade-off guy, so I know, oh, okay, this will stop here, but guess what? Crime will arise somewhere else because crime has a funny way of still sticking with us, no matter what. So, for example, aside from community-based outreach, what about giving people more insight on not only gun safety laws or how to handle themselves or how to
Yeah.
do de-escalation drills? This is what Maj Turi is doing with Black Guns Matter. You have Colin Noir, who's talking about Second Amendment rights and educating young people and all that stuff. And they're seeing significant decreases in their areas of gun violence. But yet it's not a outreach program in which they're providing like they need federal funding. They're literally just operating based off their own
Mhm.
finances and whatever donations they receive. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you. Every time my stance when I hear these statistics, how do you aggregate this data? What is less crime to you? What data did you take? That's where my mind goes. Maybe I'm very to it because of my experience of continuously searching for these kind of claims and statistical things that are made, like whether it be the gender wage gap. So every time I look deeper into these things, it's more than meets the eye. I have a feeling that data was taken from a convenient set area in a convenient set
Mm.
time in order so she's factually correct because she took the data this year, in this neighborhood.
What
During the
questions was
time,
she
you know, so it's
asking?
like exactly.
What
So, you know, it's
questions
for
were you
me,
asking, right?
that's why it's
Stats don't
important.
just reveal numbers just because they reveal numbers. If you ask certain questions, it's going to reveal certain numbers to those questions.
Exactly. Kyle, thank you for joining, man. Felicia,
Thank
as
you.
always, just shouting all of you out because we appreciate it. What's up?
Howdy.
Galactic North is in the building. Crime has a direct correlation to repercussions to actions. Laws are changing to allow people to commit crimes and get out of jail the next day. Yeah, and we actually seen that happen in New York, by the way. You know, so that's a
The
whole
bail
that's
reform. Bail
and
reform.
that's to your initial question, Macho, about the people we're electing, the laws they are passing, and do we play a role in that? Yes, these people we're electing are pushing a certain agenda based on certain political pressure, certain movements and organizations, and they're giving you what you want in a way. The
Yeah.
city's giving you what you want, so be careful
I
what we
agree.
vote for.
All right. That concludes that segment. Our favorite. We love Nobody
Fresh
versus the
air.
experts. We love this. We're nobodies, and we love to hear from the experts, whether we agree with them or we disagree with them, because the experts gives us something to talk about, right, Savory?
Let's see where this takes us.
Every single time. Well, this is Tom Soul here. He has some things, and the reason why I'm bringing this up because diversity. So he had a thing or two to say about diversity, right? And I'm making the argument that the way he describes or makes the assertions about the way they looked at diversity, I'm saying it's the same thing for reform. It's become a buzzword now. What does it mean? Is this like a magic pill all of a sudden? Does anyone know what real reform is? And are we really trying to get that? So let's see. Let's listen here what he says about diversity.
And intellectuals and race. The key word among advocates of multiculturalism became diversity.
Yes.
Sweeping claims for the benefits of demographic and cultural diversity have prevailed without a speck of evidence being asked for or given. Name a few institutions in which diversity is championed without evidence.
Guys, the question would be,
by the way,
name one way where that isn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thomas is gonna get into it in a much eloquent way than me, but I just want to say this. Take into account, Macho, we have corporate organizations with thousands of employees all having a diversity and inclusion department. Can you believe that? So now, how do you justify having that? How do you justify having that? Let's keep hearing Soul, who's much eloquent than I am,
great
but
question.
that made me there's like, wow.
Great question.
Anyways, yeah.
Great question.
In which diversity is championed without evidence.
Gosh, the question would be, name one way where that isn't the case. I would say the whole Ivy League, Stanford, Berkeley.
Corporate America?
Yes.
Okay.
It's really miraculous almost. I mean, I can't think of a word that has gained such widespread use and which is utterly unchallenged without one speck of evidence. If you look at societies that are diverse, they have all they can do to avoid mutual bloodshed. I mean, India, for example, is very diverse, and
it barely coheres as a nation.
That's right. When India was given its freedom by Britain and split into India and Pakistan, I mean, the number of people slaughtered between Hindus and Muslims ran into the hundreds of thousands.
So this is all under the guise of diversity, right? But he continues here, Savory. I mean, we're not going to play too much of this, but I'm telling you, he really gets into some areas where I had so much more questions. So here we go.
Right. So this brings us to affirmative action, of course. And let's take a look at the 2003 Supreme Court case, Grutter versus Bollinger, in which the Supreme Court upheld the affirmative action admissions policy of the University of Michigan Law School. Writing for the majority, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the Constitution, quote, does not prohibit the tailored use of race in admissions decisions to further a compelling interest in obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body, close quote. That's pretty high.
He's going to say some interesting things here, folks, that, again, is going to raise some more questions. And I'm arguing the way he looks at, Tom Sowell makes the argument about diversity, I'm making that for about reform. I'm making the same thing, the same claims to reform, and here's why.
Sounding.
What's
wrong with that?
It would have been nice if she could produce one speck of evidence for it.
Doesn't it feel intuitively correct, though?
No.
That you put students together with other students of different backgrounds?
Let's assume for the sake of argument that it is intuitively accepted. That doesn't relieve you from having to look at the evidence to find out if that's true. One of the things that when I was going around, when I was taking my kids around to pick colleges, I would go into the lunchroom at lunchtime and look around. And if I found that all the black kids were at one table and all the white kids were at a different table, I knew what the atmosphere was at that school. I went to school in the 50s. I never saw that. So you say what the
Savory, you heard what he just said?
Went to school in the 50s. He never saw.
He went to school in the 50s and he didn't see that kind of division. Black kids sitting with black kids, white kids in the 50s, bro. Like, I'm blown away right now. Bro, I don't even know what. When I heard this, I have more questions than answers.
Wow.
And he's making the claims that diversity is almost like, in other interviews, he said, it's almost like magic, right? You sit at a table with a bunch of professors and time it. I want you to put a stopwatch to it. And the person who says, diversity first, put him at the bottom of the pile, and that the person who says diversity the least, put him at the top of the pile. And he starts to say, this just tells me their intellect. This just tells me how they think, where they are. And I start to gather it based on that. But say, before you share your thoughts, look at what else he says here. This was crazy. And I want to hear your reaction from this.
The benefits are going to be, and then you come along and test it. You don't just say, that sounds so wonderful, and there's no need to go any further. And if you look at what has happened in these places, you find that the polarization is far greater after these policies are followed than there were before.
Right there. Right there. So after these policies are inputted or in place, you find more polarization than you did before. He says also, you don't just decide, oh, this sounds good in theory. You see it and then you test it. You don't just put it in place. Like, these people weren't testing it. They weren't looking at the counter stuff like that. So do you see where I'm getting at here, Savory, with the whole idea of reform and diversity? I'm saying that before it was diversity, now I'm attributing it to reform.
So how would you, like, I'm trying to see your connection so I can better understand this, because what he's saying is the effects of diversity and how we're pitching in this dream world is actually taking us backwards.
Yes.
Right. In many instances, right? So how are you connecting that to reform? Like, take a second to explain that to us.
Because every time they implement a new strategy on police tactics, someone still dies at the hand of the freaking police. And then all of a sudden, we still have systemic racism conversation.
Got it. Good connection. I'm glad I asked you. And I think people got to kind of hear that streamlined thought of yours, because I was trying to connect it, which I think I had it, but I just wanted to clear it up. That's perfect. Yeah. By the way, stay tuned if you're still in here for the Sip on Facts. We didn't even coordinate this, but mine is very connected to what you just put. So
very good,
amazing.
very good. Right. So now, what are some of the thoughts though about people not challenging or having any evidence that diversity works? What is some of the things that Sowell was saying? Do you resonate with that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where do you agree? Where do you disagree?
Yeah, let me share my thoughts on that, right? So I agree with Sowell for a lot of reasons. One is because these are claims that put you, these are claims that have you belong to a certain group, and it feels good, right? So it has nothing to do with actual effectiveness of the implementation. It has to do everything with what I call a moral high ground, a social acceptance. It has everything to do. It's almost like they pitch you a political vision that's beyond politics. the left does a great job of doing this, I always argue,
Yeah.
which they pitch politics to you, but what they're doing is they're preaching identity and belonging. So
Right.
so you feel good about it, right? The right doesn't do such a good job of that, even though some of their ideas might be much better. It doesn't come across because it feels like a political move. The left makes it seem like it's a movement. So even though diversity and inclusion, this is all politics. Companies doing it and all, they're doing it because of politics. And they're getting incentives through grants. They don't want to be sued by these new laws. So all this has to do with politics.
There's a
not
lot at
really
stake.
so most people, all in all, I would say that one of the main reasons I'm with him here is because the results don't plan out. So just same example of reform that you're giving, and I'm with you now that I better understand where you were going with that. I agree, because we pitch a beautiful vision of roses and rainbows, and then when the vision falls apart, nobody's held accountable.
Exactly. He says no
Yeah,
one
I'm
has
with
to
you.
pay the price for
Mhm.
being wrong in the academic circle.
Yeah.
No one has to pay that price. He made an example in another in the same interview that if an engineer or what is the people who build house architect, if an architect is terrible at building a house, guess what happens? His credibility is shot. Right? Don't
Mhm.
trust that architect, because if he designs a house for you, it's going down. It's going to break down. But a professor could teach you whatever the hell he wants, and there's no indictment. There's no punitive damage. No harm done. Nothing to see here, guys. Keep it moving. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, Galactic North, as we move on, I would love to hear. So I saw both of your comments. I want to address that last one there. It's like China's social debt system, right? As we move on, I would love for you to explain what you mean by that, because in the future, I would love to, Macho and I, do an episode on how that looks for us, like talking
Yeah.
about that. So just share your thoughts on there. We'd love to hear it.
Here is, I believe his name is, just so I can see for reference here. This guy's name is Melvin Russell, who is, I believe, a police chief, or once a police chief or former police officer. I'm not sure. And he did a TED talk. This was years back. This was in 2013. And he had some things to talk about what police reform is. And so this has been a conversation, Savory. I'm playing this for
Mm.
reference. This has been a conversation for decades about police tactics and about they've been having this conversation for a long time. And he was a police officer in Baltimore. Here's what he has to say.
130 cops that were under my tutelage, from being occupiers of communities to being partners. I had to figure out how to do that, because here's the crazy thing. In law enforcement, we have evolved into something incredible. Listen, we have become great protectors. We know how to protect you. But we have exercised that arm so much, so very much. If I was a natural police department and I represented the police department, you would see this incredible, beautiful 23-inch arm. Man, it's pretty, ain't it? It's cut up. No fat on it. It look good. It just look good. That's a great arm. Protection. That's who we are. But we've exercised it so much sometimes that it has led to abuse. It's led to coldness and callous and dehumanized us. And we've forgotten the mantra across this nation is to protect and serve. Y'all don't know that? Protect and serve.
Here we are. So while he's offering the possible reform change, he's also bringing an indictment that the organizations, especially the law enforcement agency, forget that second part, the service part. And Savory, we said a thing or two about what that service is. Is it a concierge service? Are they bellhops? Are they your waiters? Are they your nurse? Who are they? What kind of service do they provide? Right? And I think that gets
I
mixed
remember you
up in
mentioned
the
it.
mud there. And it becomes an indictment, and we could just make it whatever we want, what that service is. And again, he's saying in 2013 that neighborhood community policing, rather than being enforcers, becoming partners. Has that proven effective, Savory, in your opinion? What do you think?
Man, when I listen to these things, right, and this is a person who has experience, right, and I'm and in that field, right, when I'm listening to these things, I always think to myself, do these people have a voice? Do what they say even matter, right? Because I've heard so many great ideas and thoughts, for example, and why am I mentioning it? Because we're talking about police reform, politics, and what Thomas Sowell was talking about. So in my mind, I'm like, man, how do we? And again, I want to take a quick turn here. Petition our government to get what we want, or are we already doing that when we vote and they're giving us exactly what we want? All right. So those are the two things I think to myself. Are they giving us what we want because we're voting for that? Or should we exercise our First Amendment right in petitioning our local government more? Is that a time to do that now? Because these politicians, they say one thing and do another so often.
Yeah, that is so true. And we're going to hear from a politician, Tim Scott, as he talked about police reform in year 2020 on the congressional floor. And he had a passionate, very passionate rebuttal to why the police reform bill wasn't passed in 2020, whereas actually still looming over us in some circumstance. In some cases, they're still negotiating it. But what I'm most concerned with, right? You say you want police reform. You say neighborhood policing works. You're saying, hey, rather than deal with this, let's deal with that. As you change your tactics, the crime continues to get more heinous. Why? Right? You showed a video yesterday of an officer literally trying to stop a person who may be a suspect. You know, it's called, you're a person of interest, right? Someone just made a claim. They gave me the description. You're with the person. All right, let me stop you to try to see what's going on here. And as he's trying to stop him, he's non-compliant. And in fact, he has his hands in his hoodie or his jacket. And he keeps telling him, stop, 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 stop. And as soon as he gets close enough to him, he turns around and pulls his gun out and shoots him, almost killing the officer. So it's like you want all these reform, and this is where the Tom Sowell about diversity comes in. This is where I'm bringing that connection. Is that you say you want reform, you say you want to change these things, but yet the crime is still there, and it still keeps getting worse. But so where does the indictment really lie on? Savory is what I'm getting to.
Yeah, man, and Kyle mentioned something interesting here to my point too. Politicians are very good at pandering to the audience for votes, right? So this is why I'm asking: do we petition our government at the local level for them to change these laws and put pressure on them, or are we just voting in the wrong people, right? And I think it's a combination of both, depending on what state you're in or whatever. But we need to have an honest look at politicians because they're the ones who actually are pushing these reforms that are not effective, but have to do more with making people feel good.
Excellent.
You know what I'm saying?
Point.
So that's a big issue there.
Today, I lost a vote on a piece of legislation that would have led to systemic change in the relationship between the communities of color and the law enforcement community. We would have broken this concept in this nation that somehow, some way, you have to either be for law enforcement or for communities of color. That is a false binary choice. It's just not true. This legislation spoke to the important issues that have brought us here today. We wouldn't be here if it were not, as Senator Perdue alluded to, the death of yet another African-American man, George Floyd. His murder is why the country has given us the opportunity to lead.
So I want to highlight some things there. Some things that are very, very important. This was a year before the George Floyd or the Derek Chauvin trial. But you have a politician, while being a Republican, pandering to voters, saying George Floyd's murder. Wait a second. This was even before they determined murder. This was so. But you wanted to get ahead and let the audience know, because they know they're on camera. Let me let my voters know where I stand on this particular topic. You could have said the incident that occurred between an officer and yet another African American in George Floyd that resulted in his death.
Why do you think he did that?
Because, like what Kyle said, he's pandering to voters. in the
I
same
agree.
breath
Yeah.
while being a conservative. He's a conservative through and through. But what I'm saying is politicians are crafty. They still have to make sure, hey, if we're gonna have a determining the relationship here, I want you to know where I stand very clearly. So, a vast majority of people will probably be persuaded to vote for me on my next term.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And a lot of that again, it sucks because I love that we have um term limits, but do we have term limits in the Senate? No, right?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Yeah, you see, so
They're up for
so
re-election.
that
They could be there for life as long as they keep
yeah, as
getting
long as they kept
reelected.
getting reelected, yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough because to get at the root of this problem, one side is going to tell you we need a little more of we need to defund the police. The other side would say no, we need to expand it. But we rarely look at the honest data like Thomas Sowell does. Hate to bring him
Yeah.
up again, but it's like you look at the
It's
honest data and
terrible.
now, but the big problem
So
is this.
yeah,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
say this really quick is politicians are not gonna solve this problem. They'll
Oh
continue to bring
no.
solutions. So now we have to get a little creative on how to challenge them to in a way do what we say and have our own organizations doing that, right? Whether we start an organization of if you really want to help the police, you start your organization that can complement what the police are doing. You don't defund them. It's
Or
a
better yet, agree on terms and understand the trade-offs, right? If you're
yeah,
gonna put people in jail, understand you're gonna have a mass incarceration problem, right?
yeah,
So these are the things that I say are angelic. They are on the side of angels, on the side of the heavens, right? You want to
mm,
solve the mass incarceration problem. You want to solve the crime problem. These are inherent, folks. They're not going anywhere. So long as we exist here on this planet, it will always be here, right?
yeah, for sure, for sure. I
So,
want to show this clip, right? That
all right,
has to
we'll put
do
this on.
with
We'll put this. We'll save that.
um that has to do with the dangers of defunding the police and how that looks, in connection to, a lot of what we're talking about today.
Certainly, that's something we should look at and talk about. But if the discussion is to diminish the ability for our law enforcement to do its job at the sake of adding additional services, I think that defunding is very dangerous, and I think we're going to hurt the very communities we're trying to help the most.
Okay.
You see, so he's giving a complimentary, like, okay, let's work here, let's do something, but you want to destroy the building without having a plan of building a better one, right? That's not how things work, right? That's not how it works in a community. You can't just say all these buildings are no good. You have to build another one, show it's better, and then slowly start doing something different with that other building that you say is no good.
And
And that
better
other
doesn't
building,
mean the solution. Better doesn't mean the solution. It just means better than what we did before, right?
exactly.
There's always a trade-off to things, guys.
Yeah. Let me keep playing some of this.
Captain Davis?
Yes, I think that just the terminology, I think, has just been, there are different definitions to the defunding concept, but community engagement is so important to my community. That would be one of the first areas or sections in the department that would go. The very aspect of the department that builds.
So defunding the police, see what she's saying? A lot of
Mhm.
these defunding the police, the very first area that would go is that area that engages the community. So people pretend the police just go out with their guns and shoot people, and they dismiss the other side of their jobs. It has to do with helping everyday people, with taking minimal calls, with helping communities, helping the they do all this, whether
And
we
they
like to
don't
see it
even
or not.
and we don't even see it at the forefront, right? They talk about cops going to jail for their tactics, but they don't sell that as much as they say, well, he did this because this was racially motivated. So it kind of gets
Exactly.
muddied. They're being held accountable, folks. We showed that in yesterday's episode. So in order to understand what we're doing here today, watch yesterday's
Mhm.
episode.
Yeah. So let me keep playing some of this. Give us some more
builds
light here.
relationships with communities that my minority communities really want us to have. Unfortunately, that will be one of the first sections to go. So to defund our police department, I can't imagine who the surrogates would be to take over the work that we do every day. And I don't think this country really realizes how much work
Mhm.
police officers do and have taken on, even in the social services realm.
Thank you. Chief Acevedo?
Thanks, Senator. Defunding the police ranges from abolitionists that think we should get rid of policing, that would lead to chaos, to those that think we need to reinvent police, to those that think we need to take our funding and spend it elsewhere. Our community doesn't want less police, they want better policing. And I can tell you that from Houston, which is the most diverse city in the country, the majority of our community wants investments in both good policing and the social services that they richly deserve and desire.
Chief Cass-Stevens.
And one more here, just so you can see,
Thank you,
right?
sir.
There's
I'll try to
different
be quick,
ideas.
but in the 70s and 80s, our country and our government defunded social services. They defunded all the services that help people with mental health, homelessness, drug addiction, and all of those issues were dumped on the doorstep of law enforcement. And we wonder why law enforcement is struggling to deal with these issues. We wonder why the three largest mental health institutions in our country now are Cook County Jail in Chicago, LA County Jail, and Rikers Island Prison, because we forced law enforcement to criminalize some of these social ills. And
I could keep playing that, but I wanted to
brings up
break that.
a great point. But here's the trade-off. When they were dealing with mental health illness and all that stuff, how were they dealing with it? Right? They were putting people under these extreme environments, right? They were doing all these lab testing, right? It was like I forgot what it was called, but they were doing all these experimentations on people that they had to shut down those facilities because it was inhumane.
Kyle said something
go
that
ahead.
you always highlight. We have to understand everything has a trade-off. There's no solution to a problem without creating another one. We just have
Facts.
to decide what we want, which is very, very
And
important.
what we're willing to live
prior
with.
to that,
And what we're willing to live with.
exactly. The main clip prior to that with the two people, he goes a little deeper into something else, but the two people who spoke, look, defunding the police, you don't know what you're asking for. It's not only less police on the street, it's less engagement and help and resources on the street at every level, right? Because they do programs, they fund a lot of other stuff in the community, they help in the parks, they do minimal cause that we don't talk about often. All of these things is what? This is helping the community. But defund the police, when you make a blanket statement like that and you only see police as pulling people over on the road, well, that's like 10% of their job. You don't realize the necessity of them if you look at it in that one facet.
Yeah, I want to continue that Tim Scott passionate statement. Just a few more moments there, and just to kind of see where that went.
And my friends on the other side just said no. Not no to the legislation. They just said no. And why am I saying that they didn't just say no to the legislation? It's because along the way, I sat down with many of them and said, what do you need? And Senator Schumer sent a letter telling, I believe it was Senator McConnell, there were 5 things in the legislation that needed to be improved. I said, let's give them the 5 amendments. I sat down with more senators, and they said, well, wait. There's not just 5.
So I just played this a few moments later, only because Tim Scott's going to go back and forth with the Democrat Party because they said, okay, you get 5 amendments, right? You want to ratify this. You want to change some things. You don't like how this reform looks. You don't like this legally terms or this terminology is. All right, let's reform it. Then they say, no, we want more. No. They keep going back and forth. And Tim Scott says, while people continue to die, we can pass this right now. See how it works. Fix it along the way. But you guys want to hold this up. Why? Because it's not about passing this bill. It's about who gets to pass the bill. And that was the greatest thing I ever heard a politician say on the congressional floor, because this was not about saving or preserving or not having another George Floyd incident. We're going to stop all this because why? You guys want to take control over the chamber, and then you get to herald the idea that you get to pass it. So is this really about reform? Is this really about solving the issue? It's not. It's about who gets to solve this issue, who is on the side of heavens, who's in control here. This is a
Mhm.
political game, and people don't matter. I start to ask that question over and over again. Do people really matter to these people?
And look, you make such a phenomenal point there because we have to ask those questions. The questions are this: are they really helping? The law that sounds so good, is it realistic? The picture they're painting, is it gonna come to fruition in how they're saying? Like, a lot of these questions, but we can't be pitched a vision and expect the people who created these problems, like I always tell you, Macho,
Right.
to create that vision the next time better. It just doesn't work like that,
Right.
But I want to share some interesting thoughts. One of my favorite segments of our show right here, where so this is some history here on urban riots, right, and law enforcement, right? So Thomas Sowell has a dope opinion piece called "Facts Don't Mix with Law Enforcement and Urban Riots." Right. So here, this is pretty interesting because it gets into. I won't get into the whole article here, but for those of y'all who want to read this whole article, right? Let me actually put the link on here. I'll put this on the YouTube here for those of y'all interested. Bam, right there. So check this out. The political left has been campaigning against the use of force since at least the 18th century. So it is not surprising they are now arguing that heavily armed or aggressive police forces only inflame protester, thus provoke violence. All right. So now fast forward. For those who are still old-fashioned as to rely on facts, here are a few. Back in the 1960s, when riots broke out in cities across the country, the region with the fewest riots was the South, where the racial discrimination was greatest and police forces least likely to show restraint. In Detroit, with a liberal mayor in the city and a liberal governor in the state, where the police were warned against shooting in the 1967 riots, there was the largest death toll of any city during riot, and during the whole decade, 43 people dead, 33 of them black. Both New York Times, Washington Post expressed astonishment that such a riot could occur in a city with such liberal policies. They couldn't believe it, but neither of them changed his vision in response to the facts, which contradicted that vision. Right? So I'm going off the Thomas Sowell, the vision of diversity, this vision we have of how this world should function. But then when the reality shows that, hey, it's not effective, we double down on it. Why? Because people voted for you on that. People are still counting on you for the diversity and inclusion. People still love how these words make them feel. Let's stop thinking about how certain words make them feel. But let's look at some of the facts when these laws are passed. Let's look at some of the realities.
Yeah. So we're simply saying, obviously, you're going to have your emotions and you're going to be driven by it. But sometimes you got to confront these things without your emotions, right? The one thing they say about detectives, right? Do not allow your emotions to decide who's guilty. Let the evidence reveal itself to decide who's guilty. You can have a gut feeling on, yeah, I think that's our suspect, right? But that's not going to work in court. You need the evidence to support that. So you might need to take your emotions out of it. So when we heard our Melvin Russell saying, well, we became callous. We became too strong. Because why? The criminal justice system told them, are you guys allowing your emotions to lead you how you police our society? It doesn't work like that here in court. Emotions don't work in court here. Sorry.
Exactly.
You need evidence.
And I'm going to leave people with this question. Do you prefer that fewer people get killed or that a kinder and gentler rhetoric and tactics be used? Like, it comes down to the facts. Do you want, the reality is your idea is trying to get less people killed, but if you see it's getting more people killed, we have to challenge what we actually believe. So the actual force or the actual police force that you don't like because of these isolated situations, in the grand scheme of things, think to yourself, can it be helping? I would have you think about that as we come to a close, and I would say maybe so, right? I won't answer this for you, but let's think about it. Ladies and gentlemen, follow us on Twitch, handles MachoFix88. Follow us on Twitter, handles MachoFix88 Savory Edition. You can find us all across these platforms. Follow us on TikTok, where we both go live. My man Macho does a morning session. I do an afternoon one usually. Instagram, Drinks with a Nobody. Please don't miss that. We are hot there as well right now. Slowly but surely, our Discord is growing. And what else we got? One and only YouTube channel, Drinks with a Nobody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. If you're in right now, I know we see a few people on our YouTube. Please hit that like, share it, join us, and we appreciate all y'all support.
What were you drinking today? Oh wow, you.
Let me share what I was drinking before.
Yeah,
No, I
I'm
love this
curious.
actually. This is cool. We
Yeah.
live and unscripted. So I was like, you know what? Let's take this back. I got lemonade, ginger shot, and cayenne pepper.
Wait. Wait a second.
You wonder why I didn't want to share it?
Lemonade, ginger shot, and cayenne pepper.
Cayenne
What are you
pepper.
doing? You cleaning
Great.
your insides here?
It just tastes good, man. I like these weird things. It actually tastes good, man.
This is
Anyways,
gross.
till
I'm
next
having-
time, we leave you.
I'm having
What you having?
Mad Priest coffee. If you haven't heard of it yet, Mad Priest coffee, check it out. Give it a buy. That's a shameless plug there. So yeah, until tomorrow, y'all. Adios.
Cheers.